option on. There you go. Cool. Hi, everyone.
Welcome, welcome.
Welcome. How's everybody doing? Good.
All thumbs up. Okay, good.
Okay, Amy. That's cool, Amy. Don't worry, we got you. I see you. All right. Everybody good? How many people are going to be transitioning back onto campus next week? Okay. Good amount of people. Are you feeling okay about that? Are we feeling not okay about that? Yeah, well, it's kind of what we talked about last time. You just have to take care of you, and nobody can make you make any decisions that don't feel right to you. So just remember that. Yeah? Okay, well, without further ado, we have our very first special guest, Ato Blankson-Wood, who is a friend of mine from when I was doing what you guys are doing, studying musical theater. Ato and I met freshman year of college, actually the first day moving into the dorms. Hayden Hall, represent. And here we are, and Ato has had a wonderful career and experience in the theater. I will introduce Ato with his official bio. So this is Ato Blankson-Wood, and he is an actor, theater maker, and educator currently based in Los Angeles. On Broadway, he has appeared in Slave Play, Hair, and Lysistrata Jones. And off-Broadway, he appeared in The Rolling Stone at Lincoln Center, for which he was nominated for a Drama League Award. Slave Play at New York Theater Workshop, for which he was nominated for a Lortel Award. The Total Bent at the Public Theater, for which he also received a Drama League and Lortel Award nomination. I'm sensing a theme here. The Public Works productions and Shakespeare in the Park of Twelfth Night and As You Like It. Transfers at MCC. Antigone and Ferguson at Harlem Stage. The Foundry Theater's O. Earth and Iphigenia in, how do you say that? Allis at Classic Stage Company. And his film and television credits include Worth, BlacKkKlansman, The Kindergarten Teacher, Detroit, It's Kind of a Funny Story, When They See Us on Netflix, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel on Amazon, She's Gotta Have It on Netflix, and The Good Fight on CBS. And as of recently, Ato is also on the faculty of the Completely Ridiculous Training Center at the Playwrights Horizons Theater School. He's also a member of the Actors Center and a graduate of NYU Tisch School of the Arts and Yale School of Drama. So that is Ato, and Ato is going to first kind of speak to us, and this can be a conversation. If you guys have questions throughout, you can put them in the chat and we can kind of moderate it that way. But Ato is just going to talk to us about his experience with the Golden Age and beyond. So if we want to pin Ato as our speaker, if you want to do that, go for it.
I think also what might be helpful too is if you guys come up with questions, if you think of questions as he's speaking, you could also type them in the chat. And then once we open up for Q&A, we'll start with the questions that are in the chat and then just flow from there. And just for anyone who may watch the recording of this after the fact, we have been spending time on our unit that focuses on Golden Age musicals and race. All right, take it away.
Take it away, Ato.
Hi, y'all. Thanks for having me. Thanks for taking the time. I know, I know from teaching on Zoom that, the Zoom fatigue is real. So I do appreciate you guys being here and taking the time. Yeah, like Laura said, we met our freshman year at NYU. We were studying musical theater. And I'm still processing that time. I'm still processing, how that training intersects with my understanding of myself as a Black performer. And, I guess I'll go further back. My love for musical theater started with Golden Age musicals. My mom would she'd do this thing where we went to the library once a week and we'd pick out books, but we'd also pick out a movie. And her thing for us to do was to pick out, I kind of became obsessed with the Rodgers and Hammerstein movie musicals. And so we'd get one of those out and all sit on her bed and watch all of these musicals, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, South Pacific, all of them. And slowly but surely, like my sibling, I'm one of 5 siblings, and slowly but surely, like each of my siblings sort of like peeled away from doing that every week. And like, I was just the one who was left and like obsessed, like hooked on these musicals. And that sort of started my life started my interest as a performer. So I had this like reverence and love for these musicals, I think, growing up. And I don't think it was until I got to undergrad that I started to really understand that there was a racialized element to this. It's like once I left my home is when I started to understand how I was being seen in the world and how that related to the opportunities I might have as an actor. Yeah, I think that was a time where it became very clear to me that, you know, as a Black actor wanting to encounter this work, that there would often be, in the professional world, in the industry, right, there would often be gatekeepers or sort of like casting directors, producers, directors, like all of these folks who had opinions around what these worlds looked like. And often what they believed that these worlds looked like did not include people who looked like me. So this love I had for this thing, this thing that I knew I was gonna, I just knew I was gonna be involved in this type of work. You know, the golden age of musical theater was something that I like deeply fell in love with. And to have that questioned and challenged in a way that felt really out of my control really then started me on my journey around, well, what am I actually interested as a performer? Where are the places that I feel my gifts are valued? And it just, at the time, and I do feel like we're in a different place now. Laura and I were in school a million years ago, so the conversation has definitely shifted around representation. But at that time, I just felt like I needed to search elsewhere for places where my gifts were going to be valued. And so I did stay in the world of musicals for quite some time. But you know, as you all have been studying the sort of buried history of musical theater and the racialized aspects of that history weren't really ready to be reckoned with, and as such have, like, you know, they've been perpetuated even till today. So specifically in musicals, which I feel like are, you know, a bit further behind where I think straight plays and film and TV have moved in terms of how they think about representation. Just because the commercial musical theater, of course, is tied to, you know, commerce, you know, and commerce in America at this moment is tied to, there's a racialized aspect of that, right? Who's going to buy? Who are we selling to? Why will people buy these things, right? And so a lot of commercial musical theater is beholden to a history that we haven't really completely processed, right? So I moved away from that. I decided I was going to go to grad school. I was going to diversify a bit. I was going to move more into like a place where I was doing more straight plays and film and TV. And I will say that is really when things started to pick up for me, when I realized that there was a market where my Blackness, my queerness, these things that sort of like kept me on the fringes of the commercial musical theater were valued actually in this other market. And so I am now in a place where I'm trying to find my way back to this like initial love of this golden age of musical theater and musicals in general. But doing that and carrying forward all that knowledge that I got from living inside of these plays and these movies and these TV shows, right? Which are that my difference is what makes me valuable, right? And so I wonder now, re-encountering Golden Age musicals and musical theater in general, a question I have for myself is, how can I bring all of that to this work without feeling like I need to shrink or fit into an idea that these gatekeepers or producers might have around who belongs in these worlds. So yeah, that's just a bit about where I am right now as an artist, and my journey and my continued journey around my love of and relationship to Golden Age musicals. So yeah, that's just a little bit of background for me. And I just like to keep the conversation going. If you have any questions or anything like that, if Laura or Sequina wanna.
Ato, can you talk a little bit about your experience training in musical theater when we were in school? And we spent an entire year strictly working on Golden Age material. And what was that like for you as a student actor of color, or just an actor of color in general? And how did you feel you were taught to sort of maneuver those stories? I actually don't remember what your scenes were, even though we were in acting class together all 4 years. Do you remember which one you were given?
I definitely remember that there was a South Pacific scene. There was You've Got to Be Carefully Taught, which was given to every Black male student who came through that
We
program.
talked about that song. Actually, Sam presented on South Pacific.
Raise your hand, Sam, so he can know who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, it was interesting because they obviously gave me that scene and that song because they felt I would have a connection to it as a person of color, specifically a Black person in America. But there was never any explicit attention paid to that point. There was never any sort of direction to draw on my experiences as a person of color in the theater. More so, it was just given to me and assumed that I would do the work to bring that out. But when you're in a training program, of course, the people who are there are meant to also draw things out of you. And that's a big problem, I think, right now in a lot of programs, is they're inviting more and more students of color because there's a call for that. But on the other end, there's not, there's a total lack of support in terms of how you train an actor of color, right? Because there's a certain experiential divide that does not allow for, at least at the time, for those teachers to feel like they had the right to, or they were equipped to. So I don't want to villainize anyone. I just want to say that was a blind spot of theirs. And I think it continues to be a blind spot of a lot of programs. And I think that the work that needs to be done there in terms of training students of color is that there needs to be attention to who you're inviting in and who you're inviting to train as well. There needs to be a balance struck there first and foremost, right? The environment, I'm sure you all know by now that a healthy training environment is one where we feel safe and we feel like risk and failure are valued. And just felt like the environment that was created for me was not one where I felt safe to fully fail or risk, because the clarity around what the task was, what the ask wasn't there. And at that time, I didn't know to ask for that clarity, And so, so that was pretty difficult. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, I was also given Will Parker.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oklahoma, for those of you that don't know that. Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma. that experience was kind of opposite in that I felt kind of erased. You know, I came in with a Will Parker that was like someone I recognized, someone I knew, and there was a lot of make it less contemporary, which is, you know, just another euphemism for like less urban. You've heard all of these, we know all of these euphemisms. And so that was like, those were two instances that really stick out to me. One where I felt like my race was being highlighted, and one where I felt like my race was being erased. But at the same time, but in both instances, there was not very much explicit support in order to explore how I might navigate those two scenarios as an actor, how I might, what the lessons were inside of those scenes, you know.
Oh, what's so interesting is they gave you the Lieutenant Cable scene is that particular song is a white man reckoning with his own racism. So and not to say that you couldn't cast a black man in that role. I actually think it would be a really interesting take on that role. Mm-hmm. But they didn't deal with that. They were just like, oh, this is a song about diversity. Let's give it to our diverse students.
Exactly.
I'm curious to know, what was your response to that? Did you find yourself feeling the need to kind of assimilate and just fall in line and conform to the norm, or what had been established as the norm? Or did you just say, you know, I'm just going to show up as my authentic self no matter what, and, you know, they'll have to deal with it? I know as a student, the power positioning is one that's a really difficult risk to take.
Yeah, it really is. And maybe I'm preaching a little bit of anarchy here, so forgive me, Sequina and Laura, but like...
Oh no, go right ahead.
Preach the anarchy.
The thing that I think I wish I had done, and the thing that I empower my students to do, is to take full agency, you know, to respond in a way that feels... I mean, I just grew up... This is also about the way I grew up, which was like authority was to be respected, right? I grew up in a household where talking back, all of that, like that was not allowed, right? But this is a moment specific to your training and the longevity you're hoping to create in a career. This is a moment to really dig in and establish what your stance is. And to your point, Sequina, I do wish in hindsight that I had stood up for myself and said, I'm going to show up as this. There's no part of me that will be erased in order to service this character, in order to service what you believe I should be trained as, because you're training me. I'm not coming here to soak in what you have to give me. I've been invited here based on an audition that I gave. So you invited me here based on what you saw of my gifts, right? And so to that end, you have to protect your gifts and the things that make you unique, the things that make you you. And so if that is sort of pushing back, then I highly encourage it. That's something I really wish I had done. I really, in the moments of Queen, I definitely assimilated. I definitely said, you know, this is the authority. They know better. I want a career. They know how to get me that career. When in actuality, like, as I've continued in the industry, what I've realized is all anyone cares about is you walking into the room and presenting authenticity, integrity of self, of artist and of self, right? And so if you cannot plant those seeds now, there will be a problem later. Like, this is the time to really, really establish what your values are and principles are as an artist, what you will and will not contribute your gifts to. It's really, this is a time to become very, very clear about what your intentions are as an artist. It's not enough, I don't think, to say, I want to work or I want to be on Broadway. Well, why do you want to be on Broadway? What is it that you're hoping to engage with in the zeitgeist, in the larger world? Like, what is it that you're hoping to affect in the larger world? And becoming curious in this time when you have this safety net about what your values and principles are around who you are as an artist is really, really important. I cannot overstate the value of that.
I just want to reference one of the questions in the chat.
Sure.
Hope Milton says, I know gatekeeping exists in practically every community. I've experienced it myself. So I'd like to ask, how did you deal with or get around those gatekeepers?
Well, I feel very fortunate because both NYU and Yale gave me networks that I can engage with, right? A lot of the work I did early out of grad school was because I had, done little readings here and there for a friend. This friend's work was this. I had a playwright friend whose work was now sort of blowing up, and they invited me to be a part of this production or that. I think your networks are a great way around gatekeeping, because I think that gatekeeping exists at a certain level. Again, that is when the big money starts to get involved, right? People get very precious around their investment, and so it's more difficult for folks to be imaginative or want to take risks when a lot of money is on the line, and that's just a reality of the industry. So a good way around that for me was, really engaging with my peers and showing up for those moments when, a friend asked me to do this one little table read, because you don't know what that's going to become. There are ways for us to, again, plant those seeds and grow ourselves as artists without the need of the industry, right? And that has become, and even in this moment, the way Zoom readings are sort of like sprouting up everywhere, the way people are making work now, it gives a new opportunity for self-generated work as well. Unfortunately, luckily, we are having a conversation around gatekeeping and who the gatekeepers are and what it is they believe and what it is that they're after right now. So I do believe that will start to shift, but they're there right now. So as long as they're there, I really encourage you to find ways to connect to your peers. Also, folks in other programs, don't be shy about, even while you're in school, reaching out to folks in other programs and talking about how they're making work and finding out about, writers, musical theater writers who are in school right now, playwrights who are in school right now, and really starting to establish those connections. I think then you sort of fortify something that is gatekeeper proof,
Can I ask you about sort of the inherent gatekeeping in Golden Age musicals? And so these musicals, and this is what we're going to talk about when we talk later on this semester about revivals. There's a reason these shows keep getting revived, and they're going to keep getting done and done and done. So how do you feel that actors of color can sort of start changing the sort of preciousness and inherent sort of like white gatekeeping and the white sort of lens that's put on these musicals?
I don't know why this is coming up for me, but I actually recently just started working on writing a musical myself, and it's deeply rooted in my love of Golden Age musicals. Like when I think about when I dream about what the eventual sort of end product will be, it is sweeping and it is romantic, just like these Golden Age musicals, right? It's epic in its scope. And I think what really needs to start happening for actors of color is we need to reimagine or even unearth a lot of these works that live in, that have similar DNA to Golden Age musicals, and really yeah, and really start to change the minds of those gatekeepers by saying, like, there are also these works that that are ours, that also accomplish a lot of what exists in the Golden Age musicals, right? And I think that feels like a step toward making ourselves visible in these spaces as well, these spaces of Golden Age musicals. I think that, like, ultimately, what's underneath all of this is that America still has a big reckoning to have around its racial past. I think that the reason these musicals keep getting revived and revived and revived, and revived in very similar ways, is because there is it feels like in some of the ways that I feel like Donald Trump is a response to Barack Obama. I feel like the conversations we are having now are or the, like, need to stay connected with the Golden Age as it was, is about the way we're sort of barreling forward at this, like, very this kind of at an unprecedented rate. And so, yeah, I think that ultimately we can't really change anything about our entertainments, what we go to sort of escape into, unless we are really clear about the world as it is, right? And I think that that is a big thing that will start to shift representation in Golden Age musical theaters. It is continuing to delve into and confront the racial history of America. Like and I know, Sequina was telling me, and Laura was telling me earlier that, and this wasn't something we were taught either, that the roots of musical theater are in minstrelsy, which are deeply rooted in slavery and in America's racial past, right? So if we can't even go back to that and be honest about that, the shifts in gatekeeping, like, won't be, they'll be cosmetic. It'll be a Band-Aid over a bullet wound, so.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I'm actually looking forward to, from this moment on, to see what revivals will look like once we've had this sort of big breather that we're all having in the theater, what they're going to choose to bring forward in Broadway. And we're going to do a project that addresses that later in the semester, where every student is going to envision what type of revival they would bring to the next Broadway season and why. And I think that, I hope that that's what will be the consideration when Broadway does come back and chooses to, I know they're going to be choosing shows that they think are going to make them a lot of money because it's been dark for so long, but I really hope that they're taking everything that this current moment is teaching us in terms of, our racial makeup of this country and the problems, and having that addressed by reviving these shows.
Yeah. Do we want to open up for questions and allow some of the students to ask some of the questions?
Yeah, I would actually love if the students would just say their own questions. So Natalia, would you like to ask your question from the chat? You can wave.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Natalia. So my question, what I wrote in the chat was, based on the both cities that you've got jobs in Los Angeles or New York, do you see kind of a shift of the way they, like, if one treats someone who is a person of color better, or like kind of like the way that someone who is a person of color would be treated as? Yeah,
I mean, I don't know. I have a deep love for New York City. New York is my, that is my home. I'm in LA right now. I have family here, and I'm loving it here. And figuring the industry out here has, it's new. So I will just preface by saying that, like, New York is my city, and so yeah, I have a connection to New York because my community there was deeply diverse. I felt like New York is a city that values that. more so than LA. I think, again, because, you know, there is film and TV is a huge industry as compared to theater. Like, the money that film and TV brings in is different. And because, you know, capitalism is tied to race in America, I think that I find it a little bit more difficult to navigate in LA. While the projects are, I feel like, more diverse, I feel like the industry itself has not caught up to that. And that's just been my experience. But yeah, but I will say that both cities have their trials in terms of that. I just have navigated New York more, and am able to say that definitely, for sure, I feel like maybe it's just from having the support I have in New York, but I definitely feel like I can navigate that city better in terms of being a person of color. Yeah.
If you see a casting call, or if your agent contacts you about a call and it's a Golden Age musical and it's a role that's not traditionally cast as a person of color or a Black person, is there a part of you that even at this stage in your career says, I'm not going to deal with that? Or are you the person that wants to go in and break that barrier? If so, why?
I tend to stay away from it if I don't see myself in it. You know, if I don't see a space for, again, my gifts to be valued, if I feel like I'm going to have to shift something of, like, in myself as an actor and artist, then I tend to stay away from it. Just because the lesson for me has been, the effort is not worth the reward for me. I know now that you sort of have to, the things that will be most fruitful are the things that feel sort of impulsively right in the moment, right? And for me, anything that is going to ask me to shift anything that I am is probably not for me. Or if it's going to also ask me to compromise my values artistically, then I tend to say a no. Now, there are instances where I've been like, yeah, I think this character is Black. You know, there was a City Centers was going to revive Millie this season, and they were looking for actors of color, specifically Black males, to play Jimmy. And I went in and I felt like, yeah, I think that Jimmy could very much be a Black man. And I went and I played it as that. So yeah, there are instances where I do feel like, if I read it on the page and I'm like, is this a Black man? Then yeah, absolutely, I'm gonna go in for it. If there's any part of me that's like, they've done no work to sort of invite me in, then I'm gonna say no. Yeah.
Do you think there's such a thing as colorblind casting?
No, I don't. I the same way I don't think when people say they don't see race, it's like, then you don't see me. You know, we need to reckon with the fact that, yes, race is a construct, but we've employed that construct for so long at this point that, like, let's use it in a healthy way. Let's, like, not pretend it doesn't exist, because that we created that. It's Pandora's box is open. Let's deal with what came out, you know? So yeah, I don't believe that's a real thing.
Have you participated in productions where it's been colorblind casting and you've had to maybe shrink parts of yourself that identify as Black in order to make that work? And what was that experience like?
I mean, not professionally, really. I don't think I've had to. I feel fortunate enough to, I don't think that there are parts of me that I've had to shrink. I mean, yes, in training, absolutely. yeah, but never, I can't really think of an instance where there was a part of me that I sort of needed to shave off, because, coming out of undergrad and then also auditioning, the practice of auditioning was also an area where I felt this need to conform, this need to assimilate. And the more and more I did that, the less and less I liked auditioning. And so there was also a period of time where there was 6 months or so where I didn't go on a single audition. Said I needed to just recenter and get myself right. And the first audition I went to after that period of time was Hair. And the reason I think I got that job was I came in, I didn't think a single thing about, and this is something you learn in school, and sometimes it works, and in other instances it doesn't. But I went in wearing what I felt comfortable in. I wasn't like, is this right for the period? I went in with what I felt comfortable in. I sang in a way that felt good to me, that felt authentic to me. And having that experience and then booking the job and having that be my first professional job really set the stage for me in a way to say, oh, when you follow your authenticity and integrity, good things happen. And since that has been the case for me, I've been really fortunate. I have not participated in a production that didn't either ask, me to explore parts of my Blackness or parts of my queerness that I needed to process for myself, So yeah, I actually hadn't taken stock of that, Sequina, but that's something I feel really proud of in my career and really fortunate about, is I have gotten to really process parts of my identity via this work. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Lishatsi. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yeah.
Okay, cool. So first, thank you so much for coming in to speak with us. What would you say is a way that you have found the most comfortable for yourself to deal with, directors, lighting designers, costumers, makeup artists, that kind of thing, not just as a Black person, but as a dark-skinned Black person? Because there have been lots of times when people have been like, oh, I can't do anything with your hair. I can't, how do I make you look like the rest of the cast? I don't want to look like the rest of the cast in Black, How do you find the best way to kind of absorb that and then not let it bother you and also respond in those situations?
Yeah. I mean, I will frame it as a failure of their imagination, right? I will not frame it as something that's like, oh, you don't know what to do with my hair or how to light me because my skin is too dark or my hair is too XYZ, right? That's not my issue. You are the lighting designer, you are the costume designer, you are the hair designer. You should be equipped with the skills to deal with whatever is thrown at you. You should not ask me to alter something about myself or feel some way about myself because you are not able to imagine how to accomplish the goal, right? That is not, first and foremost, that's not my issue. And so to your word around absorb it, I would say don't absorb it. It's not yours to absorb. It's something that they need to figure out. I would also say, when you start working on union shows, that you'll have a stage manager, and this person isn't always going to be the person who is going to be in your corner. There have been instances where stage management, has sided with the designer but that is your first line of defense. You also have your union reps. I also will say if all of that is not available to you, and this may be a bit of, I don't know, I'm just gonna say it. Sometimes you just have to make a stink. Sometimes you just have to put your foot down and you have to make your voice heard. Get loud with it. Because once it's done, and and trust and believe you'll only have to do it once. Because after that, things will fall in line, You know, no, especially in the moment we're in right now, there are no production teams that are going to want to deal with the fact that an actor of color is feeling unseen or that they're engaging in microaggressions. That's like that. This is, I really want to empower you in this moment to say like, yeah, if all of those avenues are not available to you, you just get direct with it. You just say, that is not called for, that is not cool, and this is how it will go. If there are no advocates for you in the room, you must be your own advocate, must.
Thank you.
That's a really great question, Lashetsi, especially when you think about, you know, America is not the only country that likes Golden Age musicals. You know, these musicals are performed on tours all over the world and in productions all over the world. And I mean, I can definitely identify with what you're saying about, you know, having directors and designers thinking that, you know, I've had people ask me to bring my own skin tone stockings and, you know, nude undergarments and things of that nature. And yeah, that's not, I agree, that's not something that you're supposed to be responsible for. You shouldn't have to come out of pocket or do anything that any other cast member is not being asked to do. So sometimes you have to find agency. You have to find your own agency. That's a really great advice.
Yeah, and I think you know, and of course there are ways to do it, you know, power isn't always, you know, loud. There is a way to be gentle with it too. I'm at this point where I'm like, you know, one of my favorite things that I learned on the last production I was on was that no is a full sentence. And, you know, in an instance where someone is being asked, you know, bringing your own makeup or bringing your, no, it's, you will now figure it out because I said no. You know, there is an amount of agency that I think goes a long, long way.
Absolutely. Brayden, did you want to ask your question? I thought it was a really good one that's in the chat there.
Sure. Hi, thank you for coming. My kind of question was, how do you kind of deal with ways, or what are some ways to break through some stereotypes or typecasting that, because people will take looks at you and they'll look at your race, they'll look at your sexuality, they'll look at all these different things and they'll put you in a box. And sometimes those boxes can be full of horrible stereotypes that perpetuate bad things. What are some ways to kind of break through that mold, I guess?
Yeah, I think when initially engaging with the project, when you get the script to audition for it, to really, again, be discerning around what is on the page, right? To say to yourself, is there room, is what's written here a stereotype? That's one thing. And if you recognize stereotype, walk away from the project. Just like that's what they're interested in, and that's fine. They can be interested in that. It's just not for you. So that's thing one. Now, if you get into a room and you feel like you're being pushed towards stereotype, again, that's another moment for agency. I had an instance where there was a writer who refused to listen to his all-Black cast. He was a British man who had written a story about a family in Uganda and refused to sort of listen to any feedback, right? And there was a point where it felt like we were, you know, leaning towards stereotype. We were leaning towards a lot of these tropes. And I just had to go to the director. I went to the artistic director of the theater. I went to the director and I said, this doesn't feel safe. This doesn't feel good. This feels like my voice as a collaborator in this room is being silenced. And so, I mean, listen, I know that advocating for yourself can be scary and can feel like, oh, I might lose the job, I might upset someone. But ultimately, it will teach more more artistic integrity. It will teach you what it is you can put up with and can't put up with, right? So the ways around that, I would say, it's just get really vocal again with it, you know? If you're in the room already and you feel these things happening, to really advocate for yourself. Again, you have stage management, you have your union as well. And then you also have hopefully you have collaborators in the room who are willing to hear you, you know? And again, there's nothing like a no or walking away from something to really make a statement, you know? I hope that answered your question.
Can you address some of the ways that we can be allies for others? You know, how can a heterosexual person be an ally for someone who doesn't identify in those hetero norms? How can someone who is not Black or not a person of color identify or be an ally or an accomplice even with someone who is a person of color or a Black Indigenous person?
Well, ultimately, allyship is and this is really simplistic, but it's the responsibility of the ally, right? And so I do think that the conversations that are being had right now will lead to more vocal allyship as well. I think that also the dynamics in a lot of these spaces where people who are, you know, who are heterosexual, who are non-Black, who are not people of color, the dynamic that has been created thus far has been, oh, well, you're in, you're good here, you're in, right? But we really have to be looking at, once you hear that you're in, what are you willing to do for the people who are not in? You know, that is a question that I think a lot of allies should be asking themselves is it enough for me to be invited into the room and told I belong here? Do I want to push the needle further by continuing to advocate for those who are not receiving the same privileges I am? Or am I going to just enjoy my privileges? I'm not saying one is better than the other. I know which one I would prefer, but ultimately it's the choice of the ally, you know? And I think it's really, really important to advocate for others, because there will always be something to push against. And I think ultimately the power that artists have, writers, designers, all of us across the board, when confronting, again, these producers and directors and theater owners, the power that we have is only amplified by sort of a united front. And so my hope is that more effective allies continue to show up. But yeah, ultimately that is about examining privilege first and foremost.
I know this is kind of shifting away from musical theater, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience on Slave Play. That was really this very momentous, important play that was on Broadway last season. I'm not sure everybody in our room would be familiar, but it was a play by a Black playwright that, well, I'll let you talk about it, Atu. And can you just talk about what that experience was like? And we've been talking a lot about who these plays are for. And I think Slave Play is interesting because it played on Broadway to a predominantly white audience, and it's a play that's dealing with racial issues. So I was wondering if you could speak about that experience a little bit.
You know, being on the inside of that experience was really, it was heartening in that I could see there were so many initiatives, right, that the production took on to make sure that not only that the demographic of the audience was shifting as well, you know. Can
you tell our students what Slave Play is about?
Sure, yeah. Slave Play is it's a satire takes place at the intersection of like race and sexuality. It's three couples who have gone to this plantation to essentially do sex therapy, three interracial couples. And there's a layer where it's a metaphor for how we deal with race in America. So the first act is these three vignettes of these three couples inside of this sex therapy. And then the second act is the therapy itself. Believe it or not, it's a comedy. Yeah, it dealt with the psychology of sex and race, which ultimately is really about power. So it really dealt with the power dynamics, sort of like different pairings and different power, how these three different relationships presented different power dynamics. So yeah, that's what Slave Play is about. I don't want to give like too much away just because the play lives and kind of thrives on the element of surprise. So that's all I'll say about it.
If anyone wants to read it, I can send you a super secret PDF. So hit me up.
Secret. But yeah, so yeah, that was that. But the thing I loved about being inside of the production was I was seeing in real time initiatives to change demographics on Broadway to make tickets more affordable and accessible to people who might not normally go to see theater, to make sure that young folks, to make sure that people of color were coming to the theater. And that is the thing I'm proudest, I think, about that production was there's a lot of talk about how to diversify audiences, but I watched in real time them make an effort to diversify their audience, right? And that was kind of an incredible thing to be a part of. We had 2 nights throughout the production where the producers bought out the theater and sold all of the tickets primarily to people of color. And I cannot tell you what it's like to perform a racially charged play for an audience of Black folks. You know, it is a completely, it's an experience that I want to have more in theaters. It's an experience that is sadly so rare for a lot of actors in theaters. So yeah, I would say that I was really, really proud to be a part of that production, not just because of its content, but because of what it was able to do in terms of the Broadway and commercial theater landscape.
Do we have any more questions?
Amy.
Oh, Amy, okay.
Say your question.
Amy, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Amy. Thank you for coming. So I know Slave Play was seen as pretty controversial when it came out. The first time I actually heard about it was in an article talking about how it was controversial. What was the reception like, I guess, critical and non-critical, of the off-Broadway production versus when it went to Broadway?
You know, when it was off-Broadway, people didn't know what it was. You know, the response, I would say, was very strong off-Broadway, right? The initial sort of hit of what this play was and what it was after was very strong, to the point where we had to hire security. There were threats, there were all sorts of things. There was a petition to boycott the show. Yeah, but ultimately, see, like, what was undeniable was that this play was looking at a deep wound that the world at large was not really willing to examine at that moment. I think if Slave Play had happened a year later, if Slave Play was happening right now, I think we'd be having different conversations around it. but and then when it went to Broadway, there was a lot of, because it had it was well received critically. I think there was like this is the new hot thing. And so there was like a storm around it, like a whole whirlwind around it, like a media whirlwind around it. There was a lot more publicity. It was the thing. It was, yeah. And as such, I felt like in both instances, it allowed for people not to really deeply engage with the content of the play by sort of responding, by being reactive, right? By being more focused on what shocked them about it. They didn't really have to engage with places where they may have seen themselves in it. So in both instances, I would say that it was that people needed to take distance from it. Even people who loved it, even people who received it well, it was something you would see people need to take time to process what they had just encountered, you know? And so, yeah, they're much like, I feel like the conversation is right now. I think people are leaning in as much as possible, but there is a desire to distance from the conversation as well. I sense that, at least.
So you've been very fortunate to work on both film and theater that does address race, and you've been fortunate enough to do that under directors of color.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about Spike Lee and BlacKkKlansman, When They See Us, Ava.
Mm-hmm.
How is that different from when you're being directed by directors who aren't of color? Have you been in anything that has dealt with race that has been directed by not a director of color?
Yeah, I have. I will just say that at least my experience of it, and this could be projection, right? My experience is that there is a shorthand, and there is a relaxing into the fact that I know that when I'm being directed by a person of color, that they understand the nuance of these issues. Which is not to say that a white director or a non-Black director could not. I just notice more tension. And, in a lot of rooms right now, there's this sort of like, let's make sure we're doing it right, And I think that I respect that for sure. And I think it's probably necessary, but the way I like to work is I like to be able to relax into something. And I think that is more available to me when I'm in rooms, especially when we're dealing with race, in rooms where there's a Black director at the helm. That's just been my experience. Yeah.
What would you like to see moving forward? How would you like to see theater progress as it pertains to race, as it pertains to the production of Golden Age musicals, as it pertains to the industry in general?
Yeah, I think moving forward, a big thing is how do we make theater accessible in order to diversify audiences? We can't deny that there's a socioeconomic divide in this country, and I think it's really important to pull away from this trend where theater is just getting more and more expensive and more for people who can afford it. That's something I love about doing work with the public and the Public Works program, because Shakespeare in the Park is free, and there are so many initiatives at the public that invite folks who might feel disenfranchised from the theater to come in, and I think that is a big point moving forward that we need to address and focus on, is like, how are we diversifying our audiences first and foremost. Also, my hope is that if these gatekeepers are going to invite actors of color in, that they are not only asking to have a Black body up on stage, but also to think about what is the identity of this person and how does it intersect with who I think this character is, you know, to allow an actor to bring their fullness. I think it's really important to, to have an eye toward the fullness of an actor as opposed to sort of just their physical representation. And as it pertains to Golden Age, I mean, honestly, I do hope that these shows continue to get produced, but in ways like Daniel Fish did with Oklahoma. Like, I don't need to see another revival of these shows that doesn't speak to the moment we're in right now. You know, I think if we're gonna have these revivals, they need to really, they need to address the world we're in this moment, you know, not give us a way to revert or escape from the moment we're in. I think that is what, you know, if we're gonna, that is the potential for these Golden Age musicals, right? Is to address where the world is now. And if that can't be done, then it's just my opinion, then don't revive it. If you can't if it doesn't intersect with the world as it is right now, then it's not worth it, I don't think.
Well, then it's really just a museum piece, you know,
Exactly.
it's looking at how things were instead of moving things forward and moving a conversation forward, which, you know, I think all of these pieces really have the potential to do. It just needs some creativity.
Some reimagination.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to us. But I wanted to know, because you have worked in film as well as stage, have you seen difference in the way that, whether it be like casting directors or just directors in general, kind of see you as a person of color, as a queer person? Have you found any differences between film and stage that way?
I haven't really, and maybe that's sort of my willful ignorance around that, but I stay focused on what I'm bringing and try to take steps away from what I think they want. And in that way, I feel I'm able to walk into a room and offer what I have, and if it's not for them, it's not for them, you know? And so I just really have not been really very focused on the response, and that has been something I've had to actively choose to do. And I ultimately think that it's freed me as an artist to just come in and bring what I feel is required, and then let them decide.
Is there a Golden Age musical that you would like to get your hands on and revive or see revived? And what would you do with it?
Is there a Golden Age musical I want to see revived? I mean,
especially one that deals with race.
I was gonna say Oklahoma. It was just done. It's my favorite. I think the score is gorgeous. I think what they did, I don't know if everyone saw it, but I think what
We're gonna have Damon Daunno as a guest later in this.
My boy Damon, love him. So I think what they did in terms of thinking about talking about gun violence was really, that was very clear. But I think that there might have been a way to lean into race a little bit more in terms of how like Judd and Curly are cast. You know, the opportunities for antagonism between those two, I think would really highlight, they create an opportunity for an artist of color to bring their fullness of that experience as well. And you think about like, I don't know, you think about what happened in Tulsa as well, you know, the Tulsa Massacre. And for me, there was something, I was like, I don't know how I would bring this in, but as a director, like that was something I might be interested in, like pulling from that world as well. Just, yeah. So it'd probably be Oklahoma, and it would probably be under the lens of the Tulsa Massacre. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually had a presentation on Oklahoma that Amy gave in our class where she talked about she actually did some research about the racial demographics of actual Oklahoma during that time and how that has never been really represented in a production of Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thanks for that information also, Sequina. Yeah, for those of you that aren't familiar with the Tulsa Massacre, that happened about 15 years after the musical Oklahoma's takes place. So people of color were in Oklahoma during that time, and not only were they there, they were doing quite well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, we have just a few more minutes. Does anybody have any other questions for Atu? I will ask maybe just one sort of question that you might be able to leave our students with. So this is a very strange moment in time for theater artists.
Yeah.
Theater, we don't know when it will return in its traditional form. So in your opinion, what can young artists like our students be doing during this time to sort of keep working on keeping that part of themselves alive as an artist?
Thing one is joy. What is making you happy right now? What is bringing you pleasure? What's bringing you play? Engage with that first and foremost, just for a little bit, 5, 10, 15 minutes a day, something, something that's keeping you really alive in that way. Also, like filling up on art, there's a lot of theater streaming right now. Thinking about maybe areas that you have been less interested in. Like, I know when I started watching operas, it was like, whoa, there's the scale of this feels like it also fits in the world of musical theater and in like the Greeks and in Shakespeare, and like there's so much crossover, right? And so exploring other like adjacent art forms, I think is really important. And also, if you're a person who's interested in creating your own work, just doing that, like really starting that. If you're a writer, if you're a choreographer, whatever it is, just taking this time to explore that as well. Yeah, I think those are just, but of course, always thing one, joy. Like finding a way to stay in touch with your joy and play at this time. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Let's turn off let's turn our mutes off and just give him a round of applause for
Hey, thank you so much, Atu, for joining us and talking about your experiences with us.
Yeah, and Laura, feel free to share my email with the students if anyone has any follow-up questions. I'm happy to answer.
Sure, that would be great. Thank you so much.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Well,
Bye-bye, everyone.
Have a good one. Take care, everybody.
Oh, wait. Can we take...
Hey, oh,
he left already. I wanted to take a photo, but we didn't. We'll get it from the recording.
oh, just text him and tell him to come back in for a second. Hold, please. Oh, he's coming back. He saw that you were speaking.
I was just gonna text you. Can I take a screenshot photo?
Sure. It was so fun. I was closing out and all I heard was,
I was like, oh. All right, hang on. Let me do it. All right. Everybody smile if you want to. 1, 2, 3. Yay! All right, thank you, Atu, and we'll see you guys on Thursday. We don't have class on Tuesday. Okay?
Ato, you have a second. Could you just kind of stay on while we dismiss everyone else?
Sure, yeah.
We don't have class on Tuesday?
We don't have class